Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today we're diving deep with Nishani, whose journey from Sri Lanka to becoming a mental health pioneer shows how determination, perseverance, and resilience can transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Welcome, Nishani. Thank you for being on my show.
Hi, Anisha. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Nishani has a wonderful story and a very inspiring story, and I can't wait for all of us to listen to it. So, Nishani, please tell our listeners your journey from Sri Lanka to the US and your stops and where you are now.
So I'll start off with my journey into psychology. When I was in Lanka, I finished my high school, which was also a whole experience of itself because I didn't go through the typical route that everybody else took in Sri Lanka. We have the ordinary level examination and then advanced level examination. I hadn't done that. I had transferred over to the English medium or the London O-level section of my school. And then by the time I had graduated and I finished it, I was 14. So I was relatively early finishing high school. And I didn't really know about college. Both of my parents, they were not educated beyond high school. My mom was even pulled out way before high school because her dad didn't believe that women needed to educate themselves. So both of them didn't really understand what it would look like to advance in your career through education. They knew that education was important, which is why they were very stern, especially my father. There was no free minute growing up, every minute was accounted for. So I finished high school or, college, but it's in Sri Lanka, they call it college. So I finished that and I had discovered my love for psychology. I had known that I was always a really good listener. I was just very good at getting people to tell me all about their lives. People would just naturally start sharing about their stories. And this is, again, I was like 14 years old, right? But I was able to receive that. So I had started looking up programs. I had started looking up diploma programs, certifications in psychology, in counseling. And so I started my journey into the mental health field in Sri Lanka. I had located some colleges and I would present it to my parents and I'd be like, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. And to be honest, I've reflected on it a lot looking back. They always were like, okay, we'll figure it out. My dad, I was raised growing up with money. And then I saw my dad kind of go into bankruptcy and have to close his businesses and really transition from having a new car every month to having the same car now for 32 years. So I had witnessed, as the first child in the family, I have a younger brother. I had witnessed the rise and fall of my father's wealth or things that he was starting to create for himself. He still did some good moves that helped me eventually get to the United States. But I get to this program, I start the diploma, I start learning, and I'm in this classroom in this program with adults, right? They're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old with years of experience. And I'm like a 15-year-old learning about mental health and psychology. So around this time, as I'm doing these programs, I also had my uncle who has been a great role model and influence in my life, my mom's youngest brother. He introduced my parents into college. He was like, what about these things? And I had also been looking up with him what to do. And he hated the United States. So he was like, come to the UK, come to London, find a university here. So I was doing that. In Sri Lanka, I had gone to the British Council to try to get some help because I didn't really know what I needed to do. I started applying for colleges, started writing my statements of why they should accept me, and I needed aid. Couldn't just show up, right? And as an immigrant, when you're an international student, you have to show a lot of money before you just get a stamp of visa approval. You have to show money. I think it was a full year's worth of college education needed to be in a bank account in liquid cash, right? And in addition to that, you had to show evidence that there was your parents or whoever was paying had the ability to cover all 4 years. That was a long journey because I had done the diploma, started the applications, then realized that it wasn't actually that simple for me to head out. And this was all me because my parents really didn't know. what to do. So it was a lot of me researching. Thank God for Google at that time, the internet discovered. So I was researching it and I was trying to apply. I was really begging in emails, like, what do I need to do? Asking everybody for help. And then by 2011, which took basically about 3-4 years of me waiting, a lot of praying with my mom, who's a very devout Catholic, a lot of praying with my dad, who's a Buddhist. So I grew up with a combination of both religions. And yeah, a lot of just waiting. I started a college in Sri Lanka that was called an American college. They essentially have a satellite office in Lanka, but they have a university in the United States. So I had kind of found my way to get started on college credits and an associate's degree, if you will. So as I was waiting, I had just gotten to 2 years. I got my associates in Sri Lanka. And then my parents were finally able to sell a piece of property that my dad owned and get some help from some friends who financially helped my parents. Like, it was tough. It was not the, oh yeah, you're meant to go abroad. This was like, can we make it? You know, how long can we do this for? But my parents figured it out. I mean, I really give them kudos. They invested in me. They believed in me. Even if they didn't understand it, they really did invest the money. A lot of their wealth did go into my education because it is very expensive to be an international student in the United States.
Yes.
So I got to the United States. I got to Jersey. That's where I landed. I did my undergrad in Fairleigh Dickinson University, which is a very small private university. Now I've realized in my information, knowledge now, I'm like, oh, I probably could have gone to a different school that had lower tuition rates, but the private school is the one that replied, and I ended up meeting so many amazing people there. There's a huge international community there that I connected with. And so I got to the United States with an associate's degree in psychology, started my bachelor's, then found out some of the credits didn't transfer. It was a whole deal. So yeah, so I did it, finished my undergrad in psychology, and then my goal was a PhD. At least in my understanding of education, that was the highest form of recognition in academia that you could receive, right? So my goal was that, because in our culture, it's like, are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? Or some form of medical industry, right? Something.
Yes.
So me going mental health and psychology, everybody's like, what's that? What do you do? So you're not a doctor. I'm like, nope. So you don't tell people what to do. I'm like, no, not exactly. So it's always confusing. I think Sri Lankan my parents still struggle to understand what I do, how I do it. My dad will ask me some questions and stuff. So did my undergrad. As I was graduating, I had experienced some racism with one of the professors. I had a minor in biology and I had to take a chemistry class. And my chemistry professor failed me due to a lab not being handed over, which I had actually handed it over to her in her office, but she claimed that she never received it. And I never thought to take photocopies of this lab because, like, do the lab and then you just pass it over, right? You think, let me take a copy of this and keep it for my records. So
Yeah, no.
so I had gotten this failure. That's never happened to me, right? When you're abroad and you're an international student, we cannot afford to have a failure because you have to have
Fine.
yeah, you
Yes.
have to have this full-time status. So I had fallen out of status. I was at jeopardy of being deported because if I couldn't maintain that full-time status, my parents were barely able to keep up with the expenses of tuition. I had started working, and I'm not even sure, I'm sure this is obvious, but I had a 20-hour considered full-time job on campus, which is the only amount of hours I was allocated. And then I had 2 jobs where I worked at a Subway, I worked at a salon, I got paid under the table because people were just supporting the community around that neighborhood. And I had also been writing papers for some students from Saudi Arabia, Sudan. So their English barrier was a challenge for them, and I was able to kind of manage that and be this middle person that helped them, right? And I made some money. So I was able to afford my living expenses. I told my parents, don't worry about that, just worry about the tuition, because they really were struggling to be able to send because the dollar was spiking at the time. It's certainly not easy to convert a Sri Lankan rupee into a dollar. It cost them a lot. So I depleted my parents' money for the most part by the time I graduated from undergrad. So now here I am not at full time. I basically kind of had made up my mind, this is it. At least I got to come to the United States, right? I was given this huge blessing. God has shot a lot on my prayers and allowed me to be here. So I was grateful. And I was like, maybe it's time for me to go back and maybe I'll try again. Maybe I'll come back for my master's at some point. And I was ready to say bye. And at the time, again, God works in mysterious ways. I had met my ex-husband now, but I had met my partner, and he was so enamored by my story. We both fell in love with each other immediately. It's actually kind of like this fairy tale story when I think about it. But I was young, I was in my 20s, early 20s, and he was determined to help me stay. He was like, I want you to stay. I want you to be a part of my life. And we very quickly in our relationship transitioned into marriage. And I moved to Florida with him. I was married with him for 3 years in Florida. And while I was there, he was so instrumental in helping me get set up. It wasn't the best. We were young. We were still dealing with so many different things. I was programmed to be a housewife, and it was kind of odd when I finally did get married. It was like I forgot that I had this driven passion towards something, and I was like, okay, now I'm wife and I have to be a homemaker and I have to do these things a certain way. And I had to work on that. I think we both had to face that reality of working out our societal upbringings, the roles and expectations of family and society. I had the opportunity to start my grad school in Florida because my citizenship did shift. I was able to apply for a green card because I was married to him, and he helped me. I mean, he's a lawyer, so he helped me a lot. I don't even know if I would have been able to do that. So I give him a lot of thanks. I really do, him and his family, for opening up their home and welcoming a complete stranger, because his family was probably like, who, Sri Lanka, what? They didn't even know where Sri Lanka was. They were like, who is this person? But they opened their home with loving arms, and I was very fortunate to have that family at the time. I was able to see what a true loving family looks like when they're all together. The culture of people coming together, like this big families, big parties. It was really nice. So I pursued my graduate studies in mental health now. I had transitioned from psychology to mental health. I realized psychology was more of testing. It was just a different angle. Mental health was more of that counseling, really working with someone one-to-one, and less research. Because I discovered research really wasn't my passion. My passion was working with an individual on a one-to-one basis and helping them work through some of the entanglements that they have been stuck in, right? So I did my graduate studies in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. We both decided to move to Michigan because that's where I'm at now. I'm in Detroit, Michigan. We moved to Michigan because we wanted to be closer to his family. We came over here, and while I ended up staying in Detroit, our marriage did not, effectively remain the same. We did have a huge transition after we moved, where we kind of decided that this is not going to work out. And he was like, whatever you need, I'm here for you. But I was kind of like in Detroit, like, what do I do now? Right? I had just graduated. I didn't really start to find a job in Florida because I knew I was going to move. I was kind of stuck in Detroit, like, now what? What do I do? And I was kind of thinking, maybe I'm going to go back to Florida. I know my community there, I had some friends there, and maybe I can set up myself there. And I had a friend who was like, Nishani, no, stay there. Ask him to help you for a little bit until you get your feet on the ground, right? Just ask him for a little bit of support. And we managed that. I talked to him about that, and he was like, okay. And so I ended up staying, and now it's about to be 5 years. I was just thinking about this. Now I'm still in Detroit. I established my business in Detroit as a therapy practice. It started with just me. I had worked in the community here for a couple of years, almost got burnt out being a therapist in the community because of the bureaucracy and the politics of working in community mental health clinics. And I transitioned to private practice. I worked with another group practice. And then while I was doing that, I was always determined to do my own thing. I just didn't know what it was going to look like at the time, but I was always determined to do my own thing. I knew that this was something I could do. And I had people along the way who did encourage me. Nobody was there the whole time helping me through it, but there were people. I give thanks because I see them as angels who gave me the right amount of information or the courage that I needed, even if it was like, Shani, you can do this. right?
Yes.
I could do this. One day it will work out. So I had to get my license. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan. I'm also a national certified counselor. And so I set up Nava Therapy. So Nava Therapy was born in 2021, but officially in 2022 when I really took off and left everything else and I started everything on my own. Nava Therapy, Nava is a Sinhalese word for new. Nava stands for new. So I had thought, I want to introduce therapy in a new light, combining what I had experienced in the eastern part of the world and bringing that to the Western world. Because by this time, I had been exposed to multiple cultures within the United States. I had been in Jersey,
Yeah.
Florida, and now in Michigan, in Detroit. So I was like, you know what? I actually can represent what it means to assimilate into a new culture while still holding on to some parts of where I've come from, even though I'm not really close to any Sri Lankans. There is a Sri Lankan community in Detroit, I mean, in Michigan somewhere, but I haven't really tapped into that. So I kind of felt like I was alone for a long time. In fact, meeting you and connecting with you made me, and listening to your podcast made me realize, like, wow, there are so many other people who have been through similar stories. And when we talked, I realized you and I had been through very similar stories.
Yes.
And
Yes.
well, what are the chances that our individual, independent, powerful stories will somehow have this alignment, right? So yeah, so here I am. I have Nava Therapy. I'm 2.5 years into my practice. I went from just me to now having 5 therapists in the practice total. I did also hire my brother. He lives in Sri Lanka. He is my biller. He's my right hand. Actually, he's become the most amazing person that I've ever worked with. And his work ethic, right? It's another immigrant. Granted, he's not in the United States, but like his work ethic is not comparable to a lot of other people that I've met here. So yeah, that's kind of
Yes.
where that's kind of how I got here, I guess.
Yes, lovely. This is wow, a lot to unpack. There's so much that has, from your journey from Sri Lanka to New Jersey to Florida to Michigan. That's amazing. Talk about perseverance and determination. So kudos, first of all. Yes, I also give thanks to our parents for supporting our dreams and helping us, be where we are today. I say that to everyone, every episode. So, what was it like when your parents were trying to figure this out with you to send you here? How was that situation? Like, what went through their minds? How did, I'm sure there would have been a lot going on, in the transition. So, how did that look?
Wow, yeah. It was a lot of stress. I think my dad had to really put aside his ego and his pride of asking people for help. And he did. Oh my gosh, I really value what he did then. It was really difficult because there was a lot of people who advised my parents against me doing this. There was a lot of people who friends and family alike, who commented that I shouldn't be sent abroad because Sri Lanka has everything you need. Why would she need to go? What would be different over there? And we need to
So
keep
similar.
right? Like, and I got even made fun of for my accent. I always had an accent speaking in English, and people would say I sound too posh when I was in Sri Lanka. I had my mom reminding me that some of her friends, their family friends, had said, Nishani sounds like she's from abroad, but she's not even traveled abroad yet. And so I had, we had a turbulent time in Sri Lanka. It was not, when I look back at it, I can't even remember how many times I would have prayed to please let me do this. Please get my parents access to money, access to funds. And there was many years where my dad was trying to sell this piece of property that ultimately paid for my undergraduate education. So it was very stressful. And my brother, right? My brother was there. And at the time, I was so busy trying to get my things together that I think I even forgot that my brother was there witnessing all of this. And I left him behind when I left, when I finally
Yes.
had a chance to leave. Obviously, we've reconnected and we have an amazing relationship now, but it was different then. It was very hard. My parents, it wasn't like they had this dream for me to go abroad. It was against the current. I pushed a lot of boundaries. And I was considered kind of like the black sheep of the family, if you will, because I was always speaking out a little bit more aggressively for a girl. I was always saying what I wanted. I was going for it, and marriage wasn't what I wanted. And I still, to this day, my parents are like, so about that marriage thing, about the children thing, right? But
Yes.
I'm like, hey, you guys invested in a different thing. That was never supposed to be my path. That was never meant to be in Sri Lanka, and I understand that now. So it was tough. It was really tough. It was a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of hoping, like, is this even going to happen? And then me realizing maybe I should just give up and stick around in Sri Lanka, continue the certification programs and the diplomas. And there was college, American kind of college, or international colleges in Sri Lanka that would have allowed me to get some part of my education, like the associates that I ultimately did. And the undergraduate degree would have been possible in Sri Lanka. It just wouldn't have looked the same, especially now that I've received and completed the education here. I'm like, yeah, this is what I needed to really expand my awareness of mental health and psychology. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes. And I'm going to go back to when you came to New Jersey. What was it like when you first got here? What was the cultural adjustments that you had to make? What was your cultural experience when you got here, and how easy or difficult was it for you to assimilate? How welcoming was it? And what was that journey like?
So funny enough, when I first landed, my dad had one of his old rugby students who lived on Staten Island. There's a huge Sri Lanka community on Staten Island, and he had come to pick us up. And I remember him like driving us through, and I'm seeing all these highways coming through Jersey, or JFK, I'm sorry, and having to get into Jersey. I still remember seeing like the amazing city of Manhattan and the highways, and I was like, whoa, like look at how big this country is, and at that time I thought that was like the biggest I've ever seen, and now there's so much more to America. So my dad came over with his student. They dropped us off. I walked into my dorm. I did stay in a on-campus dorm for the first year, which was really helpful because it actually is the reason why I met so many people and I was able to kind of connect with the college vibe. We couldn't afford it for the whole 4 years, so I did have to move out. But that first year, I got to really like bask in that experience of college life, which I didn't even know about. I had only seen examples of it in movies, which is not a great representation of that. So my dad drops me off, right? We go to Target, we get a bunch of things, and this was the first time I'd seen a Target, and it was this huge place, right? Everything you could ever think of was available under one roof in this place. And that's not even a super Target that I've now discovered. There's bigger ones. So my dad and I are like, whoa, right? So he tries to haggle with the girl at the counter because he was spending money. And he goes, can we get a discount too? I'm getting all this stuff for my daughter, right? So I'm embarrassed because I'm like, this is the place to do that, Dad. And he drops me off and he goes, I'm going to go hang out with my student and his family. You're good to settle in, right? And I'm like, okay. And he just kind of leaves. So I'm dropped off on this campus. I just had my stuff for the dorm room, and I've clearly always been a self-starter. I'm clearly very independent because my dad felt comfortable enough to just leave and say like, you got this. I remember orientation. I remember we had in orientation they had announced who has the longest last name.
Oh,
The
wow.
in the last name, and I had made it to the last two standing in that international students orientation, and I then realized, the amount of people that show up to educate themselves and how all of us were just kind of in this one place, and it was incredible. But the culture shock, Teaneck, New Jersey was a very small town. It was a small Jewish town, so it wasn't this grand place where the campus was kind of tucked in very perfectly. So it wasn't a loud, large campus where there was a lot going on. I have since then experienced college football, college sports. Like the campus that I belonged to was, relatively speaking, smaller, still amazing, but smaller. So it was an easier transition for me, in my opinion. I think if I had gotten to one of the bigger universities, I might have been a little more surprised or shocked, or kind of like, whoa, there's a lot going on. So the language barrier was a thing. I did have an accent. I did I spoke English in Sri Lanka and I practiced it. My parents send me to classes. It's just so different trying to manage that here, right? Over here, everybody's first language is English.
Yes.
And trying to make sense, like, how do I convert what I'm thinking in my mind into something in English? And I had those moments. But while living on campus, I was considered a sophomore because I didn't start off as a freshman because I had done my associate's degree. So I didn't actually get placed with the other freshmen international students. So I was actually away from them in another dorm where there were more local or American students, where there were sophomores and juniors and seniors, and a whole basketball team lived in the dorm room that I lived in as well. And because of that, I actually got exposed to my friend Yemi, who I introduced you to.
Yes.
She was from Nigeria and she was right across the hall from me. And then I met another friend of mine who was an American. He was local to New Jersey. And so I kind of found some friends, a small group of friends, while I still connected with the international students. And the culture shock was mostly just me giving myself time to realize that everything was just that much bigger in the United States. It was like
Yes.
where I would travel, it was taking a bus, going to Manhattan. I loved going to Manhattan. We would take the 20-minute fast bus or whatever it was called at the time. It was a nonstop bus to the island. We would take it, we would party there. It was just, by party, I mean, we're broke students in undergrad, right? So
Yes.
lamb over rice on the truck food. Like, it was very simple living, but it was perfect. It's exactly what I needed. And I mentioned, I had experienced some racism within campus. I didn't really know how to advocate for that. I had connected with the International Students Office and I was a mentor for other international students coming in. I have always been a chameleon. I've been able to fit in anywhere I've been to. I would say one of my strengths as a person that I just didn't know.
Yeah.
I found a way to fit in, but that did mean that I had to change some things about me. Maybe I spoke English a little differently, and maybe I tried to listen to how people speak, and I would try to match their accent just because I'm like, okay, maybe if I sound more like this person, not everybody's gonna ask me a question of like, why do you sound British, but you're not from Britain and you're from Sri Lanka, Asia, and people will be like, what
Yes.
Sri Lanka? And they'll ask me where I'm from, and I'll say Sri Lanka, and they're like, what's that? I'm like, well, it's a country to start, since you asked me where. Like, it's a very small island. Not a lot of people know about it, clearly, but it was not scary. It was just exciting for me at that time. I was more excited about being able to finally express myself because in Lanka, I did feel kind of contained. As a woman, that I didn't feel like I had the luxury to just speak my mind. In the United States, I actually did. I could say no and be more aggressive with how I'm saying no, and it was okay. It wasn't shut down like, hey, know your place. It wasn't like that. So if anything, America really allowed me the ability to express myself freely and to get out of my shell, even though it was super scary. And I stayed within the confines of the campus. I didn't really, explore a lot. I volunteered at an elderly home. I worked in the community, right? The subway and the salon was right in the community. And I would walk 30, 40 minutes every day from where I lived to campus. And Jersey, with the winter and everything, I would take the
Oh,
bus.
yeah.
And I somehow did it myself. I did it. I would ask help from people when I didn't know. And with the phone, I couldn't afford a proper data plan. So it was a prepaid phone. So I would have to
Yes.
take screenshots of the map to figure out where I'm going and the times of the bus. And I would talk to my parents once a week or a couple times a week, and they would ask me questions, and I didn't want to alarm them whenever I was stuck in something because my mom would freak out, like, oh, you
Yes.
okay? And she felt so helpless because they couldn't do anything and they weren't here, right? They didn't know anything about the United States, so they had no idea how to help me. It's funny, I think about the transition of the weather, right? I walked in around fall. It was 2011 August when I first moved to the US. So
Wow.
it was fall season. So it was still warm, but getting colder. And in Sri Lanka, we wear flip-flops 365 days a year, right?
Yes.
Rain,
Yes.
shine, flip-flops, because
Yes.
rain boots? What do you mean, right? Like, we don't, what? It's okay. So when I'm here, I was in Jersey and I was walking around, and my friend, I still remember her looking at my feet, and she was like, Nishani, it's like cold. what are you doing with flip-flops? And I was like, well, this is what I'm used to. She's like, okay, wait a second. We need to get you boots. We need to get you a jacket. She's like, it's about to get colder. I didn't understand what she was
Yes.
about. I really didn't. I was so excited for snow, but I didn't understand what she was referring to. I will never forget. She lent me her boots, and I ended up wearing those for many years until they were literally falling apart. I couldn't wear them anymore. So much. They were so cute. And she gave it to me. She was like, just keep them. She was like, until you can afford something, just keep them. I have extra. I ended up getting a jacket with her. I always had people who helped me figure out what I needed to do.
Yes. Yes.
Didn't know. And the international community, we all just kind of stuck together. You know, we had our own celebrations. We found a way to keep each other safe and accountable. And transitioning to winter was definitely, I still remember when it snowed, I was the only one who ran outside of my dorm. And that's when my friend was like, Nishani, come back in. You need to wear boots. You need to wear this jacket. I didn't have gloves. So I was like, it's okay. She was like, let me go find my gloves. The time that it took for her to go upstairs, I was already outside of my dorm and I was already touching the snow and I was trying to make a snowman. And then I very quickly realized my hands are going numb and it was turning red. And I was like,
Yeah. Oh,
oh,
wow.
something I had not experienced before, right? So I remember kind of having to realize, like, oh, this, it doesn't feel like it because it's so cold that it's getting numb. Turns out it's actually not good to do that.
Mm.
So yeah, it was so weird. Even now I get excited with the snow, but now it's a little different. Obviously, it's not the same excitement, but that was really, that assimilation was mostly like getting accustomed to the weather, getting accustomed to the language, and figuring out how to communicate with the professors. I did work on campus and I worked as an international student's administrative assistant. And then I got picked up by a different woman who saw me for what I did. And she was like, you know what, I want you to work for me. And then I transferred over to another part of administration. I think this was the program where adults who didn't graduate or didn't finish their undergrad, but want to come back and finish it like 10, 15 years later, and they want to use their credits. So I helped this other administrative person on campus. I had found different ways of fitting in, if you will, you know, and it worked. You know, it's very difficult to explain sometimes. When I go back, I could
Yes.
talk hours, but yeah, be
Amazing.
positive.
That's lovely. Yes, you brought back so many memories for me because I came in the fall as well, and then the transition to the snow.
Mm.
Apparently, that was the warmest winter, and I was freezing. So, yeah, I can relate to that. So, you did talk about your marriage when you were young and the role of your ex-husband in your life, and you moving from Florida to Michigan. Tell us more about how that chapter in your life shaped you into who you are today.
The best way that I would describe it is, in my marriage, we were just excited. We were so in love with each other. Anybody at the time, if they saw us, they would be able to tell, like, we were like so in love with each other, right? And the way that it shaped me is that it helped me realize who I am and what I really stand for outside of all the societal rules and the cultural expectations that I was having to work through, because that's something that came up for me. At least I'll speak for myself. I really did kind of lean into this, like, oh, I'm a homemaker, I'm a wife, so that means I need to be the one cooking, I need to be the one cleaning, and I should be in the kitchen. And, you know, we didn't really talk about children, but that was kind of in my mind, like, you know, marriage, first it's marriage and then comes children, right? That's actually, if anything, my parents were pushing for that the whole time. But he was so supportive of me going to grad school and starting my venture as into the career, right? And as a lawyer, he was very much, I would say, slightly unhappy with the fact that he was practicing law where he was. So he was also working out his own adult, I would say, existential questions of what are we here for? You know, what are we here to do? So my marriage really, number one, it introduced me to what it's like to be with a family that actually was loving and caring. I did not have, all of my extended family members were not as supportive. I did have a lot of conflict in my dad's side of the family. So it was challenging for me to see what connectedness looked like as a family, as a unit, outside of the nuclear family. So he introduced me to that. His family, he had an older sister. So it was like basically me, like me and my brother. I saw his sister and him, and how she started her business and how she was doing really well for herself in Florida. And so I got to experience that and I got to see what it was like. And marriage was kind of confusing. It's like we didn't really know how to lean into this, but we somehow figured out a way to be each other's support system. So Florida it was a challenge. It was not all fun and games, it was we had to learn how to communicate. We had to learn how to be in somebody else's presence. This was the first time I was living with somebody, right? So we had some very interesting, funny moments in the living arrangements that we had, in the apartments that we had. We somehow figured it out together. And yeah, I would say the most important thing that I took from that chapter of my life, from that season, was just realizing what I stood for. And I had to kind of shed these layers of belief systems and societal expectations and my parents' expectations for me of what it means to be a married woman. I had to learn how to still represent myself without getting lost in the relationship, in the marriage, and losing myself in the process. And it took me some time, even after our separation, for me to wake up to that. It actually did take me a while to realize, like, oh, this is me now. This is who I am. And I was sad that I lost that part of me at the time, but I give thanks to the past version of me because she figured out a way to survive. She did what she could, and I give thanks to her every day. It was more about, who is Nishani? How can Nishani continue to hold space for herself outside of all of these external voices telling her what she needs to be and what she should be? Because that's a lot of our culture, right? You should be like this and you should be more like
Yes.
this, less of that. So that's really what taught me in the marriage was, how do I continue to have that? And how do I let go of my own beliefs about what it means to be a communicator and a partner in a marriage? Because I had grown up seeing my parents, and that was the only role modeled relationship that I had witnessed. And my parents weren't the best at being each other's partners. They were really great parents, but they weren't great partners to each other, at least not the whole time. But they're still together. They figured it out, And I was sad when our marriage did end because there wasn't a lot of support for trying to keep things together, trying to figure out a way to make it work. Because in our culture, if divorce is even a topic, everybody jumps in, right? Everybody wants to come in and go like, what's going on? Let's not jump to divorce. Let's take a moment to pause. And the Western, because my ex is from the United States, and I called him an all-American white boy, blue eyes, blonde hair, right? So I just figured maybe his culture and his family, they don't believe in that, and they just didn't. They just wanted to support him, and it kind of did leave me stranded in the middle of like, what do I do now? How do I find support, right? So there were some things that I really had to face by myself that I didn't prepare for. I didn't really know how to, but I did. It was a lot of crying. It was a lot of sleepless nights again. It's kind of like the same experience as when I was in Lanka. Like, what do I do? How do I move on? What am I supposed to do now? And I was a divorcee, right? And in our culture, divorcee is like taboo for a woman. And I still, to this day, my parents do have that struggle. My dad struggles to communicate that I am divorced. I wear it boldly. I'm not ashamed of my life and the things that have happened to me. And I am unafraid to speak on it. But I notice that my parents are not as comfortable being able to say that out loud. They do struggle with that. So there was a lot of that I had to manage, a lot of their opinions when I was going through the separation, where my parents felt so helpless from Sri Lanka, and they were telling me, do this and talk to him and try to get. And I was like, I'm alone here. I am not sure if I can. I didn't feel like I could fight for it, and I did kind of try, but it just was a different time. I was a different person. So, and it was for the best. I believe that both of us are now friends, and we were able to move past all of that. And it was a good thing that we separated, because he wasn't supposed to be my life partner. And I have found a life partner now that I am truly, truly grateful for. But I now recognize the difference. I now notice what it means to find that type of partner and to create that kind of relationship through the hardships, through the ugly, the bitterness of life, right? And to be able to hold space to keep that commitment to each other. So yeah, that's kind of what I discovered.
Amazing. Well, that's a nice way to put it. Through the hard times is what keeps us going. But kudos to you for, again, going through another challenge with determination and perseverance. So how do you help your clients embrace change?
So I would say in my therapeutic work, I tend to be a little bit more blunt and aggressive with my clients. I'm not the therapist that just lets my clients ramble on every session, going through the same cycle over and over again. I do poke, I challenge. I have clients who've gotten mad at me and like left my office, slammed doors, like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, because I'm pushing some boundaries, right? I never thought that therapy is supposed to be lifelong. I would never ask a client to be in therapy forever because there is a time for us to work on our past. I've had to do that for myself. I had to work on my inner child, figuring out how to love her and give her credit for all of the things that she survived. And having done that, it made it a lot easier for me to witness that in my clients. I would see my clients in a spiral, especially when you talk about trauma. As an immigrant, right? Like I have gone through some stories that have been very distressing, and that ability to move past them is not something that everybody just has. That ability to just move past something like that is really very challenging. And I sometimes don't give myself enough credit for how much I have survived and had resilience towards. So with my clients, I really try to allow them this opportunity to wake up to who they really are. Again, the journey that I went through, and kind of break them from this hamster wheel. I like to call it a hamster wheel. We like to get on this wheel and we're like, we feel like we're running, we're going places, but we're in the same place, we're just burning ourselves out. So as a professional in the mental health field, my goal was to allow my client to, number one, feel safe with me, right? Because you can't ask someone to change if they don't trust you, and building trust takes time. So I'm, like I said, as a little child, right? People would just tell me about their life. So it's like almost like I had that going for me, that people would just trust me with their life story. Even as a stranger on the street, I've sat at a grocery line and someone has told me about their entire life, their marriage, and what they were going through while we were waiting in line in like under 15 minutes. So that's something I do give myself credit for, where I have been able to allow my clients to tap into that comfort of, this is someone you can trust. This is someone that will keep that secret in a vault, right? Because that's what a therapist does. I hold a lot of people's secrets. And the way that I would help them embrace inner growth is by allowing them this opportunity to face their shadow, face the parts of themselves. I call it the narrative, right? The stories that we tell about ourselves. Sometimes we do write the story as if we are the victim. We do write it, and it serves us and it serves our identity to be that way. And I had written the story of being the victim in my own life, and I had to wake up to that, and I had to challenge that, and had to break through that wall. So I kind of just try to role model that for my clients. I try to show them that this is also something that we are all doing. We all do it, and it's all about survival and feeling safe. That's what it all comes down to. We just want to feel safe in our bodies, in our lives, in the environments that we belong to. And sometimes in our childhood, we have been exposed to so much pain and distress, right? From adults, from society, from culture, whatever that looks like. And so then as we grow older, we kind of have these weights that we're carrying. We don't even realize we're carrying them, but we've been carrying them for a while. So I help my clients let them go with love, with compassion, with acceptance, with self-acceptance. I allow them the space to work out those past experiences and to kind of cut those ties. Not that you need to cut people off, but to cut those ties, to come back to the self-expression, to wake up to your purpose. And that's been my motto in life, is to help people wake up. And that's my why. It's why I do what I do. And so that's kind of my journey and my process in therapy. Sometimes it doesn't look fun. My clients are uncomfortable sometimes. I'm uncomfortable sometimes. But I have met such amazing people that have survived so many challenging, awful things that have happened to them. And I'm like, wow, I thought my story was powerful, but then I hear other people's stories and it humbles me. And it makes me realize, like, wow, so many people are capable, humans are capable of surviving such devastating circumstances, and we are resilient. That's really the word for human existence, is our resilience.
Yes.
That's
Amen to that.
yeah.
Yes, definitely. It is a humbling experience when we hear others' stories, and it gives us perspective on how to navigate our own lives.
Mm.
So, what advice would you give others creating their own path, other immigrant women, starting their own path in the US? What would be your advice?
I would say do not let anybody get in your way. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to put a lot of their fears and insecurities onto you. And if you are an immigrant woman in the United States, if you're an immigrant in the United States, you have already done something that not a lot of people are capable of doing. You've already stepped outside of a comfort zone that not a lot of people will ever do in their lives. We like to stay in the safe bubble. We
Yes.
don't step outside of that. That would be my advice, to continue to hold space for yourself and to find a way to come back to you always. We all have an inner wisdom that's built in, that's available to us. And sometimes we get told, no, don't listen to that. Listen to everybody else, right? Follow what everybody else wants you to do. And that happens a lot. A lot of people will have opinions on what you should and should not do. So it's really, my advice would be, if you have a vision, if you have a dream, just hold on to it, meditate on it. I envision it often. I sit with myself often and I'm like, what is it that I'm doing? How would I like to go about this? And yes, it's going to be a challenge. It will push you to some limits that you've never discovered before. It's also going to help you if you're going into running your own business. It kind of forces you to look at your relationship with yourself. That's been my biggest lesson learning curve in the last couple of years, is what is my relationship? What does Nishani believe about herself? And how would I like to treat myself, right? Because when you are your own business, nobody's telling you what to do. Nobody's coming to you and going, hey, at 9 o'clock, you should start your day. You should be doing this website stuff on this day. And in another podcast, I was listening to you speaking to somebody else about their web development and how they kind of started. And I struggled. I had some savings in a bank account and I was looking at it and I had to spend some money to build a website. And I was like, if I let this go, that's all I've ever had, right? This is the most amount of money I've ever collected in my life. And it was very difficult for me to just let it go. And I still remember my partner looking at me and being like, Nishani, invest in yourself. It's the best thing you could do. Look at what you've done. Just invest in you. It is worth it. You are worth it. And I needed to hear that. And he was the catalyst that kind of pushed me out of that comfort zone. And I'm like, okay, I'll spend the money. It's all right, because I didn't want to make my own website. That was not my area of expertise. I did work with a Sri Lankan woman who helped me design the logo. I found a way to utilize home in the business,
Yes.
right? And somehow create that. So my advice would be, find a way to connect with the roots, right? Keep that going. You don't have to completely submerge yourself in your culture where you used to belong, but it's okay for you to take parts of it and to honor where you came from and to keep holding on to your vision of whatever it is that you want to do, because it is all possible. There's plenty of space at the top. There's all the space in the world at the top, and all you need to do is believe and let that traffic just disappear, right? Meditate, focus, and breathe into the body. Those are advice that I give people now as they're starting their businesses and they're going like, hey, you've been doing your business. It's been 2 years. What would you tell me to do? What should I do? What should I spend money on? What should I expect? So yeah, those are kind of like the little nuggets that I've been holding on to that I wanted to share with other people too.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, Nava Therapy is undergoing changes this year and lots of great things coming for Nava Therapy. Tell us more about it.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited to announce this with your podcast. This is the first announcement that I am making officially. Nava Therapy is going through a rebrand. I did try to get some copyright to get the Nava Therapy a trademark, and that's really the reason why I'm making this transition. I had already known that therapy was not the only way that I wanted to help people. I just didn't know what it was going to be until 2024, when I had realized what my next step was. So I'd like to announce my next venture, my next season. My new business name is going to be Attunigrate. Attunigrate is a word that I have created. It is born out of attunement and integration, a representation of attunement, which is to go within oneself. It's what I was just talking about, right? Having to discover who I am and tune into that inner wisdom. And integration, which is the journey that I took, assimilating into a new culture, integrating what I have learned from Sri Lanka, bringing it to the United States, and finding a way to hold on to my authenticity and who I am, who I was raised to be, while still allowing myself the freedom to integrate as a new version of myself as an adult and what that will look like. So Attunigrate is my next venture. It is going to have a combination. So I do still plan on keeping and continuing my therapy practice. That will be Michigan-based. Because of insurance, we work with insurance providers, and my therapists are licensed in Michigan. So Attunigrate, there will be a branch of therapy that's Michigan-based, and then Attunigrate will also transition into coaching, workshops, speaking engagements, because I have been having different people reach out to me from all over the world, actually, and being like, hey, I saw your profile and I'm a Sri Lankan in the UK. I'm a Sri Lankan over here in Canada, in California. I really want to work with you. And because I was tied to my license, I just didn't want to do the therapeutic work. But I'm at a point where I'm realizing, I can expand beyond that. I do represent what I will work on and speak about. I have walked the walk and I'm still walking the walk. I challenge myself every day to walk the walk. If I'm going to tell someone else to do something, I'm like, how well am I doing it? I challenge myself that way. And that's also something that comes from my culture, from my parents and upbringing, always staying true to that. So Attunigrate will become more of the coaching, the workshop, speaking engagements. I have a couple companies that want to invite me over so that I can work with their employees, kind of help them set their mindsets into what's the purpose, how do we stay connected to ourselves, and how do we allow their creativity to come out, right? And because I have the therapy hat already, I can see both parts. I can see when someone needs to do some inner child healing, some trauma work, and then I can redirect them there. And then other people who have kind of done that work and now they're just stuck in some kind of like core beliefs. They're like, their self-worth is being challenged when they're starting off their business. And I know I've been through the same thing. So what am I worth? And so I've had to experience that and work on that and challenge myself. And I'd like to share that with other people. I really would like to work with other women. Other immigrant women would be perfect, allowing them to kind of collaborate and helping them navigate the waters that can be very difficult, because starting a business in the United States, nobody in my family has done that. So I can't even reach out to any of them to ask what to do. I've just had to figure this out. And I've had some roadblocks. I've actually had to lose some money along the way for hiring not the wrong people, or not the ideal persons, or people who I believed would do what they say they would do, but they couldn't. So I've had my own roadblocks that I've had to work on. So this is my new season, what I like to call my new venture. The new season of my life is Attunigrate.
Well, amazing. All the best, and we're wishing you a lot of success and can't wait to hear how this journey transforms, and maybe you can come back and share with our listeners how your journey has been. So if people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
I would say I'm on LinkedIn. My Nava Therapy website is still live. At some point, it will transition out, but Nava Therapy is still a great place to connect with me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. In fact, that's where you and I have connected as well. Anybody can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm on social media platforms, although I'm not as active. So LinkedIn or email would be the best way. Or they could reach me through Nava Therapy. And when Attunigrate does go live, I would like to I thank you for the invitation. I would love to come and talk about it and share more about what I have done and how I've kind of taken that next venture and what I have turned that into. So that would be another way that people could reach me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with me today and sharing your inspirational story. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best for 2025.
Thank you so much, Anisha. It's a pleasure being here.
As we wrap up this inspiring conversation with Nishani, remember that your past experience can become your greatest source of strength. This is Anisha Jennings reminding you that sometimes the most powerful transformations begins with the single step towards change. Until next time.